I need to look at that link that you sent, Daniel. Eager to start developing this Lord of the Rings Axis and Allies. It's gonna be lit.
What makes you think I haven't already finished it?
Touche. You probably finished it before I even suggested it. Or possibly before we even met. Just been holding out for these many years.
Perfect yet.
Hey, come on.
No, I made Nex and Allies based on the first age of Lord of the Rings, which I think we only played once. But I specifically didn't do the third age because there's already several games that cover that. So I wanted something a little bit more out there. The biggest issue I'm seeing as far as that goes, because we might as well discuss that right now. I'm doing literally nothing. The biggest issue is I don't know how we're going to diversify units.
So
Which is the big issue that the first age had.
Yeah.
Where there's like 2 common types of unit, and then there's 1 unique unit for the free peoples, and like 2 that the shadow get. But still, that's very few units. Also, are we doing any navy? Because there's a little bit of that, but not a whole lot that comes into play as far as the War of the Ring goes.
Right.
And are we doing Air Force at all?
Yeah, you got the Nazgul, you got the other air things, right? There you go.
Eagles?
There's a little bit. The good guys have eagles, the bad guys have the fell beast with the Nazgul.
There you go.
That being said, I don't know if I love that, because it's not like the eagles are something you can muster into an army, and the Nazgul are very limited in number.
Right.
So
My thought was to do some sort of a hero mechanic with units, like if you have a hero with your army, maybe by themselves they are a 4 on offense, 4 on defense, and take 2 hits.
I did already add in that maybe we wanted to do some kind of hero mechanic. What that would be is up for debate.
And maybe they could boost the army in some way similar to the Risk version. Although that could get out of control if you put them in a massive army, since you have so many dice you can roll instead of Risk where it's 2 or 3. So it wouldn't be identical, but it would be.
There's also the option of leaders giving rerolls.
There we go. And then the ring, the fellowship mechanic, figure that out. Maybe, so my initial thought, if we wanted to do a unit per unit conversion, you've got like your typical foot soldiers, which are infantry. Maybe you have archers, which can boost your foot soldiers in combat, or maybe they deal preemptive damage like submarines do every round. But essentially it would work like artillery, either with a boosting mechanic, or since they would like fire volleys before the hand-to-hand combat starts, they could have like a preemptive roll. And then you'd have cavalry, which would be essentially tanks. They would move further, be stronger. Maybe we split up and make 2 different units for light infantry and heavy infantry, just to make 4 basic land unit types. Since most of it's going to be land, like you said. Like, there's a lot heavier of a focus for land combat than either Navy or, by far, air combat. A little more flavor. Introduce an extra unit or 2 for land. But yeah, a support unit, a preemptive strike unit on land like an archer battalion. Could work. What'd you think of that?
I don't hate it. It depends on how how much we want to have the focus on strategic versus tactical. This is something, because we've discussed this with Nick before too, Alan and I, at length, that Axis and Allies is definitely more of a strategic type game where it's macro. And in that kind of mindset, archers, I mean, I make the same argument as far as artillery in general, but archers are more of like already part of the infantry companies. That being said, again, like I make the same connection between artillery and infantry in normal Axis and Allies, that artillery is attached to infantry divisions. It's not like you just send out a handful of cannons to fight. So as far as that goes, there's that interpretation of getting into the nitty-gritty of it. That being said, the mechanic can work, especially if trying not to throw too many crazy things out there that are just completely different is one thing we always try to go for. So using the sub mechanic,
right?
Using the sub mechanic that people are already familiar with is probably a good idea. Hi, Ahsoka. You're not supposed to be in here, little girl.
She said to run this way immediately.
So maybe we can do a light infantry, a heavy infantry. Heavy infantry having a little bit better stats, maybe like 2 on offense instead of 1.
Very possible. I mean, you could also do...
This?
What, Alan?
I feel like we're already overcomplicating it.
Well, the other...
Land units, yeah.
Yeah, the other side of the issue is you have like 2 units, and that's the entire game. You have infantry and cavalry. It's a little one-dimensional, which was my issue with trying to design the first stage game.
Yeah, you definitely don't have just 2. You have to have the 3. You got to go with the infantry, the artillery, and the tank. So you go foot soldiers, archers, and horsemen, cavalry. Those 3 replace those 3 from normal acting right there.
But then
flying is kind of complicated because you've got a couple different, but it'd be hard to find 2 different types of flying units, I think, to make this work.
Right.
So only 1 flying unit that limits. And then we talked about Navy. Navy, I think, should be included, but obviously it's going to be a minor aspect of the game just based on how the game works.
And then I would think for Navy you might have
She'll be included.
Convoys or transports, possibly a light ship and a heavy ship, and that would be it for Navy, because you're not going to have aircraft carriers, and naval combat, like you said, both of you said, is not going to be a big part of it, so it's pointless to have 5 different Navy units.
Yeah, as far as the War of the Ring actually goes, the only... Like, I don't even think there's direct ship-on-ship combat. Maybe there's some near the mouth of the Anduin.
Right.
But basically, it's the Corsairs come in on ships, then they get fucked up by Ghostmen, and
maybe
then reinforcements from Dol Amroth come up.
Maybe we do a river mechanic where you incorporate that with the Navy, and you incorporate it with what they did in the films, and I'm sure the books, which I didn't actually read, but don't hate me. But you got convoys, you got light ships, which are weaker, and heavy ships, which are better, but the heavy ships are the only ones that can go on the sea, and the light ships can go up the rivers and offer some sort of combat involvement on adjacent tiles, adjacent land tiles, like bombardment or something. And so that gives them a little bit more to do, because the ships go up and down the river in the series a little, like, especially playing a role in the battle for Osgiliath, right? So that gives them a little bit something extra to do and makes them a little more worthwhile and less boring, other than just, hey, this is a weak ship, this is a strong ship. No, this ship can actually go up rivers and help a little bit to a certain limit.
Yeah, one of the great boons of Gundor's defense is the River Anduin, which is very difficult for the orcs to get across.
Yes.
That's kind of what stalls it for a long time.
And I think only for that reason that gives there some actual reason to be some naval combat, because it gives access between, say, Harad and Gondor to try and vie for supremacy to open up another avenue for invasion.
Sure. The issue that creates is, how do the rivers function as a space? So, are they borders between spaces? Are they small sea zones? Long, thin sea zones that disconnect the spaces? Or do they have some kind of specific mechanic, almost like a reverse canal, where if you have control of the sea zone, then you have control of the river, and then you can cross it?
So my initial thought is they are their own space for the purposes of sea movement, but they would act as you could cross a river with units, but it would take an entire unit's move to cross if you're doing it for land. But if you have ships in a river zone between two spaces of land, then the enemy could not cross while the ships are there. So the ships would be blockers, because land units could essentially raft or ford their way across, but not if there's some light ships there. You know?
Not sure.
So instead of having rivers cut you off from land movement everywhere except for a few choke points, you could cross rivers, but they would use up all the movement space, so cavalry couldn't just move 2 spaces while crossing a river. It would slow them down, so they could go from one side to the other, but it would take their whole turn. Essentially like tanks not being able to move and load into a convoy. Cavalry could move 1 space across a river. Any unit could, as long as the river's empty of enemy units. There's no ships there to stop them from moving across, but if there are enemy ships there, you can't ford across a river, raft across a river. You'd have to go to a crossing like an Osgiliath, like a specific, this space is a bridge sort of a thing. So then that would increase the value of having light ships on your side if you can stop the enemy from fording across rivers, major rivers in the game. And then maybe that would increase the value of the aerial units, and the archer units would be the only ones that could attack ships in an adjacent river space. Maybe something like that, apart from other ships.
See, well, now you're adding cross-sea to infantry combat mechanics.
Yeah.
Way too much. Stop it.
Otherwise it'll just be dull. Gotta add a little spice.
Change the focus of the conversation.
Spice is at the end of the ring. The map is significantly different. You're going to have different teams. There's going to be different places you go, different opportunities you have just to play in Middle-earth. A major mechanic you need to throw in, if we're going to make it with the Third Age, is putting the ring in there in some way and having that affect the game in a different way. That's the big change in mechanic. Everything else is monotonous. It's changing, again, the infantry to the foot soldiers, the artillery to the archers. Most of that stuff's got to stay the same. Yes, ships, you're getting rid of subs and carriers because that's not going to happen in this game. But you have stronger ships, weaker ships, and transports. And maybe your stronger ships are allowed to bombard in some way. You know, there could be some advantage to them just not being bigger ships, just like you would in other versions. You know? So
that makes sense.
We need to keep most of the mechanics. 90% of the game needs to be based off what people already know. Yes, every version has little changes here and there with costs and stuff, but we could adjust that as needed. Again, that's pretty monotonous. But it's 1 or 2 major mechanics to change, and a different map and different teams, and then we keep the rest the same. So, rivers is a horrible idea. It's way, way too complicated to incorporate. Even if we change nothing else, it's a complicated issue. Much less with incorporating the other things we're going to put into a game that's already relatively complicated. X and Allies is not necessarily simple. Now, for us, it may be from one version to another because we play so many. but generally speaking, it's a lot of work.
That's the fun of it.
Yes, but it needs to be fun to play. And if we can bring in a group of us who have all played a bunch of times, but I explain the rules to you guys and Aaron, and half of the rules you guys forget about if we don't understand, it's no fun. The rules should be easy to maintain so that we can move from version to version and just remember those few key differences. So it's simple to teach, to learn, and for other people to learn. Because again, if you just open up a game of X now as you've never played, it's crazy complicated to begin with. Much less if you put in all these extra little rules on top of the normal basic stuff that's already there.
This is for the advanced players. This one's for the pros, though.
I mean, it's going to be,
pros?
yes, but still don't want to put too many more things in. There needs to be some fun mechanics, yes. That's part of the difference. Things are a little bit different. And again, the ring is going to play a major part of it. That is going to be the most complicated thing to incorporate to make sure that it makes a difference, but it doesn't destroy the game at the same time. That balance will be key, as well as all the other normal little balances. How many units to put where, the turn order, where the map works, where it doesn't work, all those different things, which will, again, be a complicated issue already.
So as far as the ring goes, how is the balance of the game going to be set up? So, to be accurate, there really shouldn't be a hoot and hell chance of the Free Peoples actually being able to throw down Barad-dûr. It does not matter, they should not be able to actually invade it. That being said, is that how the game should be designed? That you basically have to win via the ring? Like most other Lord of the Ring games, the ring is kind of the good guy's victory mechanic? Or should it be more balanced, that you can get the victory one way or another? Also, there's always the, as far as X and Allies goes, typically it's the one side with a stronger presence on the board, and then one that wants to elongate the game as long as possible to win via that, via attrition. If anything, I'd say the Shadow probably should be the attrition side. But on the same time, like, maybe it should be the good guys trying to hold out until the ring victory mechanic would be there. If there is a ring victory mechanic.
I think there should be
a lot of it comes down to how is the ring being implemented. Also, are there options for how you use the ring? Do the good guys have to destroy the ring? Or can they choose to take up the ring with, like, a chance of the space that it's in gets corrupted every turn you're using it?
I like that.
It can give you -1 on all your die rolls in this battle, but before the actual battle happens, you roll the 6-sided die. If it's a 6, they just all convert to the bad guys. I don't know, just throwing that out there.
Kind of like the options in the Hearts of Iron mod to try and seize the ring, no matter what faction you're at if they're passing through. And then you get a significant bonus just from the standpoint of you're not railroaded into we must destroy the ring, because that opens up an option for maybe a good guy faction does try to use the ring to actually win militarily, but it comes at a good chance of stuff going bad. That could be fun.
Or to really throw a wrench into everything, one of the factions can claim the ring and make a third faction. Just this team is now its own third faction in the middle of everything. Because the other Free People probably wouldn't be too pleased. But also, is the Fellowship part of the good guys? Which is kind of like how the War of the Ring game is designed, where the good guys control the Fellowship and move it around. Or is it just an impartial third-party thing that moves of its own accord and you can't really control? Which is more of how, like, Lord of the Rings Risk is designed. Things we need to figure out.
Indeed.
It all comes down to, what's the ring's mechanics? It grants much power, especially to those who are already powerful to be able to wield it. And it corrupts. The more you can do with it, the higher the risk of corruption. And the longer you have it, and the closer it gets to Sauron.
That'll be the biggest thing, I think. Determining a good balance and fun way to incorporate that in that manner.
Honestly, the rest of the game, I think, hinges on how we decide to implement the ring. The ring mechanic is the big thing. And then from there, we can start discussing how other mechanics might play into that.
I definitely look at the orcs, Mordor, and such to be the Axis. I would want to start with them having an ungodly advantage, and they're going to attack right away. And it doesn't necessarily work with exactly how it all works in the books and such, but
Of course not.
generally speaking, they are the ones on the attack. So I think it makes sense for them to be the attackers. Take a bunch of ground right away, and they should have a significant advantage, I think. Again, I'm not sure if I like the game mechanic having the clock of, okay, the ring moves and eventually gets destroyed, and okay, if it gets destroyed, the good guys win. Maybe that's how it should work, but I'm not sure. I'm convinced that's how it should work.
Well, to go off the Hearts of Iron, it could be when the ring's destroyed, the bad guys get weakened significantly. So it's not the game is over, but it's you have to win now. Kind of like in Star Wars Risk when Order 66 is called. The good guys are like, well, we've got to win in the next 2 turns or we've basically lost.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, just going to keep referencing back to other games.
Yeah.
But Alan, you don't like the idea of the clock.
No, I do not.
So then the ring is a game mechanic, not a win condition.
Yes, that's what I think. I don't think it should be a win condition. Because if it's a win condition, okay, so the bad guys have a chance to collect it. As soon as they collect it, they win. That, I think, ruins the game, because that could shorten the game significantly. I think it has to be that, okay,
they
there's
get a significant
some
buff.
kind of... Right. And if it goes long enough that it is quote-unquote destroyed, then they get a significant,
And that could be part of the hero mechanics, where if you send heroes with the ring, it increases the good guy's chance of keeping it safe. Or maybe even some other benefit, like the good guys would have a decision between using their heroes for combat tactical purposes or using it for more strategical purposes with the fellowship or something like that. And I think we could do that pretty simply. Just gotta think about how that would work.
Trying to brainstorm. Like, I don't necessarily disagree with, everybody having like a hero unit. That's kind of cool, some kind of bonus that it gives you in some way.
I think the heroes is a big part of Lord of the Rings. I think there should be some kind of hero mechanic.
Right. Just trying to figure out how to make that work. And Risk, it's simple enough. X and Allies, I know people compare the two a lot, but frankly, to me, they're very, very different games. All right?
It's checkers to chess. To anybody that hasn't played them and looks at the board, it's the same game. To anybody that's even played one of them, they know they're completely different.
Yeah, there's that. My nation is growing. We've bought up a few states from the British Crown to expand our company. I just have to be careful because I'm essentially trading factories for states. So I'll be running out of factories soon if I'm not careful. Union busting! There we go. Non-align for the win. Let's do it.
Research slot 3. Yay. Also, I'm almost done taking care of these pancacos. Canned tacos.
By United Provinces. Done.
Had to get focus first. Navy, we're saying 3 types of ship. I'm working on the Excel because I have nothing going on.
Oh, God. Damn on his Excels.
Alan, Excels are good for organizing information.
Which state do we buy next? Ah, there's the next one. Hopefully I can buy them all before we break apart. There's a factory.
Are there going to be faction-specific units? Or does do both sides get heroes? Or are those just the good guy thing?
I don't know about faction-specific units. Unless you're talking about faction-specific heroes that do different things. Because a hero from the Shire would not be the same as a hero from the mountains domains or the elven domains, unless we want to keep it super simple.
My personal thoughts as far as that goes, I think with how we're setting up the other units, that faction-specific stuff isn't necessarily needed. Eagles are going to be just the equivalent of fell beasts as far as the air units go. Infantry, archers, cavalry pretty much all line up. If we do heavy infantry, I mean, for flavor, we can say like that's trolls for the bad guys, and for the good guys, I don't know, it's it's better armored dwarves. As far as leaders go, I think leaders for both sides make sense, and it's just the bad guys that's not necessarily, but pretty much just Nazgul is the idea. I don't know about making specific leaders. I mean, we could. We're definitely getting into a little bit more into how War of the Ring does it, where you have like some specific people who are better, and then you have like more generic leaders as well. So like the bad guys have the Witch King and Saruman and the Mouth of Sauron, as well as the other Nazgul.
Like a tier 2 leader or tier 1 leader. Unless you're talking specific powers for different leaders. I think that gets a bit, it adds a little flavor to
far
each faction, but yeah, it gets a little complicated.
I don't hate the idea of like a faction ability though, where each faction has something that they're good at.
That would make sense, because you know Rohan's going to have maybe the best cavalry. That just makes sense.
or one cost cheaper cavalry.
So that they have the most, yeah. Naturally, that'd come out of that. I like that. So what different playable factions would you guys like to see?
I made a list.
What you got?
By clicking on that link that is
The nations. So for the Shadow, the bad guys, we have Mordor, Lestor. That's a joke. Saruman, the Dunlandings, the Easterlings, the Southrons, Dol Guldur, the Goblins of the Misty Mountains. That goes into pretty good detail. I don't think we'd include all of them. There's easily some that can be combined. But that's as much detail as is reasonable. I mean, we could break the Goblins of the Misty Mountains into, like, each nook where there's Goblins in the Misty Mountains. We could go Mount Gundabad, the actual Goblin Town, and then into Moria. But that's as detailed as I think we should break it up into, which gives 7 factions. We can probably combine a few.
Mm-hmm.
Free peoples: Gondor, Rohan, Dale, the Beornlings, the Brelanders, the Dunedain, Rivendell, Lothlorien, the Elven Halls, Lindon, Erebor, the Iron Hills, Khazad-dûm, and I have a note saying "ha ha" next to that one, because they're dead by any beginning timeline that we would consider, which is something we need to discuss too. The Shire, and the Blue Mountains. Blue Mountains should probably be with the dwarves instead of after the hobbits.
Probably.
So plenty that we could include. It all depends on scale. Like, if we're making this with 1,000 spaces, yeah, we could include all of these factions, and the games would take 8 weeks. If we're trying to make it reasonably of the same size as, like, one of the other Axe and Allies games, we need to combine several of these. Of course, we could follow, like, what War of the Ring does, where all of the elves are one faction. We don't necessarily need to do that. But also, each of the elves has this one little realm, which is going to be probably 2 or 3 spaces at most on the game board. How impactful are they going to be as one little nation?
Right.
On the other hand, that kind of fits for the elves, as they are supposed to not really have a whole lot going on anymore. That they are in decline pretty heavily. So
I kind of like the idea.
if they can't produce a lot of units, but start off with a fair bit, then that's possible.
Right. I like the idea of having maybe 4 factions per side. Maybe you combine the dwarves, you combine the elves, and there are the factions that play more like a UK, where you've got smaller groups of forces spread out, and you have to decide where you want to focus them.
Well, getting rid of my couple joke ones in here, which I was hoping you guys would read, and I wouldn't read off to you, but it's fine.
You're not
So
funny, Daniel.
Going through the Shadow, who's included? Mordor,
Yeah.
they're obvious. Saruman, certainly one. The Dunlandings, probably just included with Saruman. Otherwise, Saruman is like one space faction anyway. This gives him more territory, and basically they work for Saruman anyway. So, I would say remove the Dunlandings. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Maybe they're a neutral with certain leanings.
Why'd you even have the Dunlendings in there to begin with?
I was being as detailed as possible for consideration.
They could even be a neutral with Axis leanings, so to speak.
I mean, they could. They're just going to be activated turn 1, so I don't know how much of an impact. Oh, by the way, just as far as like comparisons to the War of the Ring game go, we're not putting any kind of like can't go to war mechanics in, are we? At least not a lot of them, I would hope.
No.
Thinking about that. Because who...
No.
So do you want to start it
Swear
after
to
the
God.
Fellowship departs when the actual war breaks out?
We do need to discuss the timing of it, which
Yeah.
impacts some other decisions, particularly as far as the ring goes. I think the earliest we would consider starting it would be like Bilbo's birthday, when Frodo gets the ring, which technically leaves 17 years until he leaves the Shire. So more realistically, when he leaves the Shire or when the ring leaves Rivendell, I would say are our two big choices.
Right. I wouldn't be opposed to a few turns of build-up where the Fellowship is going. He gets the ring, he gets to Rivendell maybe pretty much immediately, and then the Fellowship forms, and if there's a hero mechanic where heroes can go with the ring to make it more secure, then Fellowship, good players can decide if they want to send their heroes to the Fellowship or keep them at home. And then that offers
finish.
That offers some simple branch offs at the beginning to set up the kind of gameplay and strategy as a good team that you want, while building up certain forces that you want to try for, while the enemy also builds up for maybe a few turns at most, and then the war breaks out. That was my thought.
So start in the Shire, have 2 turns of Frodo taking the ring to Rivendell, and then everybody's at war.
That.
And in those 2 turns, you can build how you want to do your setup.
Basically, yeah. And you can decide if you want to assign heroes to go with the ring to help prevent the enemy from getting it, or to keep them home as part of your build-up to start manning the defenses and building your armies and getting ready for a military campaign. Position them where you want, gives people time to get their direction going, so to speak. I like that idea. Instead of just, oh, we're at war now, and so we're kind of possibly boxed into whatever's most convenient from this initial setup.
Alan, any input?
Hate you both.
He just wants to play
This is
he just
what I
wants to
think.
play Lord of the Rings Risk.
He wants
What
to
I-
play Axe and Allies on a different map. Is closer to Alan's.
90% of it is just that. Yes, because you overcomplicate the game, and it makes it so much harder to play with any kind of definition of balance. The more you change, the more impossible it is to find that balance. You guys want to put so much flavor into it to make it so realistic. But
Alan,
the
I want
real
to
is
put
makes
so
it
much flavor into
impossible
it.
to
You don't know
balance.
how much I'm restraining.
Right, you're already restraining, and it's still way too much. All right.
Oh,
Ugh.
Also, I didn't say I was for
Team-wise-
any of these things. I'm just spitballing.
yeah, this is an idea. This is brainstorming to make it the best it can be without making it unplayable in a single day.
Well, you guys are making it unplayable. That's what I'm hearing. All right.
Well, if we go
Jesus.
super basic, I think it's just going to turn out to be the Risk version with different unit types, and it's going to be a quick thing. and it's
Stop
just
calling it
gonna-
Risk.
That's
not
what it's
Risk.
going to be. I don't want it to be just that. It's got to have a little Lord of the Rings feel too, apart from just the map.
The map, the
Some
units,
flavors,
the
yeah.
ring. There you go.
But the ring is a very.
I like the hero thing. I just
We have to nail a lot down with the ring.
the
mechanics.
ring is what.
The
Yeah,
ring is the
I
most
think it's
undefined.
got to be something. the simple thing of the ring is that there's got to be some kind of countdown. And again, it can't be the winning and losing. I think the ring starts. I think it's independent and just kind of moves on its own. That is what I think is the best way to do it. I do like the idea of possibly able to use it to your advantage on offense as like the free peoples. But I'm not sure how you make that mechanic work either if there's a time frame. Like, okay, so I'm going to use the ring to my advantage. So does the ring not move then? It doesn't move towards its goal every time that someone decides to use it. So there's a negative because, you guys can't take away the strength of your opponent until it gets destroyed. So every time you use it, yeah, it's going to help in that one instance. But they are not going to get that massive debuff that we're hoping for. Like we could say once the ring's destroyed, okay, all of the shadow suddenly only gets half of their IPCs. That's a huge difference. So every time you slow it down, you are hurting yourself significantly. But there may be a battle here or there where it might be worth it to say, hey, this is a huge battle. Let's use this ring to our advantage here. And yeah, it's going to slow it down for a turn, but this may be worth it for this specific battle.
Well, that might be how we use it too. Like the shadow has a military advantage from the get-go because they're evil and they're building up and they're all about war. And it's feasible for the good guys to beat them, but it's not likely until you destroy the ring. And so the faster you can do that, the faster you can kind of tip the balance into slightly favoring the good guys for the long game, sort of an allies thing versus the Axis where they start off with more forces. But a significant determining factor is going to be whether or not you successfully destroy the ring and how fast that happens. And it's not going to be game over if the ring's destroyed, or necessarily game over if it's not. But if it's captured and the bad guys are on anything except for their back foot and retreating when they capture it, then at that point it's almost going to be a sure deal pretty much. But if it gets destroyed, maybe there is a significant decrease in the IPC income or something for the bad guys because they just don't have that power behind them as they did before. And that mechanic could be pretty simple, but it shouldn't be a win or lose. It should be this is going to affect our strategy and the military aspect of it. And that's aside from any corruptive. If the good guys decide to use it, maybe they have to carry it with a minimum of one hero or else the ring can't move. And if the hero uses it, maybe forces in that space will do better when the hero's with it. But there's a chance to lose the hero every time you use the ring to boost the forces. And the hero's just gone and the ring can't move until another hero comes to move it. Who knows? That's a little bit more complicating it. That's more tactics with the ring. But strategy with the ring, yeah, bad guys have an advantage militarily unless you get the ring there and destroy it. And then at that point, the balance might shift to the good guys actually being able to fight them off. So, could be IPCs cutting. That'd be the simplest way to kind of shift the balance. What you think?
Yeah, my question is if the heroes necessarily need to interact with the ring. I think the heroes are good to give a distinction because I agree with Daniel in that the heroes, the small people that make the difference, are a key to Lord of the Rings. It's part of what makes it different. So, I think those need to be incorporated, but I don't necessarily think that they need to have anything to do with the ring itself. I think the ring itself should kind of be its own entity that, okay, as the game starts, it starts in Rivendell or the Shire, wherever we want to start it at, and each round it moves. And in that space that it's in, the good guys will have the ability to use it if they're in that space. If they're being attacked, they can use it to defend themselves. If they're attacking, they can use it to attack. But I don't think it should move with anybody. I think it should stay in that space and move on its own. It's just if the good guys use it, it slows down its advance, which is a negative. If the bad guys are in the space, I would say they should have an opportunity to try and find it. And if they find it, then okay, they get massive bonuses. So not only do they not get debuffed when it's destroyed at the end, they're going to get more. So if it's found early on, you're screwed. Right. So you are in the best interest of not only defending yourself and surviving a long period till the ring's destroyed, but also protecting it along the way to the best of your ability.
So that's when.
And sometimes you might have to use it.
It would be even more strategic to have that mechanic where you get a couple turns until the ring arrives at Rivendell, and then each of the good countries can assign a hero to remove from the board and assign to the Fellowship to help accompany the ring through, decreasing the chance it'll be found, or maybe even speeding it up, depending on how many heroes or which heroes are with it. So the heroes are not on the board and can't be fought when they're with the Fellowship, but they kind of help the ring along.
I like the assigning heroes to the Fellowship, and as a counter to that with the Shadow has their heroes too. First off, I think just generic heroes. I don't think we specify one hero from another. I think that's too much. But you can assign one hero or two heroes or whatever to the Fellowship, and the Shadow throughout the game then can throw their heroes at the Fellowship as well. And there's combats of the Fellowship.
There we go. That sounds good to me.
So then there's two types of battles.
So maybe the good side has a couple heroes per faction, and they can divide them up between Fellowship or field combat heroes, so to speak, as they see fit. And the bad guys will have heroes, but maybe fewer, which would make sense with the story anyway. And they're probably going to mostly focus on, they would definitely focus mostly on combat heroes to boost their combat armies, but then, like you said, as the Fellowship passes through different spaces, if there's opponent heroes in those spaces, it could increase their chance to find the ring or do Fellowship combat, hero v hero, something like that. And there could be some simple hero combat mechanics that we devised to come up with that. So yeah, the chances to find the ring would be extremely slim for the enemy unless either they hit stronghold points on the map, or unless there's enemy heroes present to actively seek it out and possibly do Fellowship combat. And if you roll super awesome, you can kill the enemy heroes. But if you're Alan, that won't ever happen. That should be in the rulebook. Alan can never kill heroes.
Getting back to the nations, though, since that's something I think we can actually solidify. One thing we didn't discuss is the idea of any neutrals. There's a lot of just empty land in Lord of the Rings. That being said, it's not like there's a... I honestly think we just don't include neutrals. And we just have all the land belong to somebody or another. Even if it's pretty much worthless and just empty.
I would be opposed to pro good people, pro bad people neutrals like Dale. They're not going to get involved unless dwarves go in there and say, hey, you should join us because we're friends, right?
Well, Dale gets attacked in the actual War of the Ring. They get attacked and then spend the whole war hiding in Erebor with the dwarves.
Ah, okay. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, they get fucked pretty heavily.
I
think it's a lot simpler just... I don't know. I think it's simpler just to not have neutrals. Just have every space be somebody's.
It would be simpler. I think it's simple enough mechanic to incorporate if we do have neutrals that it won't gum up the works at all. We just have to, as we're developing it, think of a decent way to incorporate it. Because there's some areas, if you walk into it, if you're their ally, they'll join you, of course, and if you're their enemy, they're probably going to try and fight you, but they're weak because it's just them. So that could be a good way to allow for some combat for some players in different areas without fighting directly against another player immediately. And that might even be a thing that happens before the Fellowship meets. Maybe the evil is spilling out from these concentrated strongholds into neutrals and trying to seize territory before they go to war with the major nations. After the Fellowship begins.
So you're saying before war is actually declared?
Yeah, they'd be
going off of that mechanic?
Pretty much. The evil guys in particular can go in and conquer spots that aren't aligned with, like Gondor or Rohan, and fight them before any Fellowship happens. And maybe the good guys can go march a soldier into a friendly neutral and before the Fellowship happens, or maybe we wait until the Fellowship happens and then they realize, oh, evil's spreading, we can go do that and have people join us. Kind of gives the bad guys a head start militarily, which is how it went.
I don't know. I don't love the idea. Because, consider the scenario of we attack this place and somehow lose the battle. Are those guys now activated for Gondor, and Gondor is now in the war early? That's typically how the neutrals mechanic goes. Unless all of these neutral countries are just literally empty, and it's just free territory to walk into.
Unless there's neutral
Which, in fairness, probably is accurate, but if there's any kind of fight possible, I don't think the mechanic works.
Gotcha. I wouldn't think that the good nations would get involved if a bad nation attacked a neutral. That's not how I would set it up, at least. Until the time comes when they are involved, because the plot thickens. But yeah, I get you. It would just be, every space would be either good or bad, and in specific factions, and then once the Fellowship happens, then war breaks out and everybody's able to fight wherever they have territory. Is that more of what you're thinking?
Well, that's the simple way. I'm probably leaning that there's certain pro-ally and pro-shadow areas. I don't know if there's any just true neutral spaces. I don't really like the idea of being able to attack at all. If there is the pre-war period, I don't like the idea that any attacks can happen whatsoever.
I'm more partial toward, yeah, the evil's gonna evil, so sure, they'll seek to expand into just the neutrals to consolidate strength and territory before war between the actual player-controlled factions would begin. So that gives them...
See, my whole...
Oh, you're good.
Yes, it makes sense, but my argument to that is, well, then they're just going to do that every game. So you might as well just have them start with that territory. If turn one, they just walk into it anyway. There's literally no purpose to make them neutral if they just get walked into immediately. Unless there's a risk involved, meaning that they have standing armies in those neutral places. But then there's the risk of, well, what if you don't take it?
Well, yeah,
does that standing army just sit there and be like, oh, well, that sucked.
Well,
can't wait for them to come back tomorrow.
It's kind of neutral then, to where the good guys and the bad guys can't attack each other through there, unless you're willing to commit enough to take it and then attack through there. But the thought being that that opens up options for, okay, do I want to attack these two spaces that are neutral and kind of focus my war effort more toward having them and leave these other ones alone, or do I Do I want to attack through this avenue mainly? Which way do I want to plan my strategy and go through? Give more gameplay options. And give
Alan,
bad
what are
guys
your
the way
thoughts
to
on
do
the
that.
neutrals?
There should be no neutrals. Neutrals are dumb.
How about there's a third player where all the neutrals are under their control and non-aligned, the vaunted third faction that Daniel spoke of. There you go. Yeah, it's the perfect compromise to ruin everything.
That's accurate.
I'm uncompromising, obviously. Yeah,
See, on
I
the
don't like
one
neutrals. It is complicated. Sorry, go ahead.
But no, I had asked your opinion and then started yapping. So you go first.
Neutrals present the problem of people having attack and extra battles that don't progress the story as much, and we want the game to advance. But just generally speaking, I like to avoid the neutrals. I understand the process of them and some, but I don't think in Lord of the Rings they're necessary in any way, shape, or form. I think they're irrelevant. The complicated part with the map is figuring out the teams, as we discussed. And okay, some of them are simple. You know, you have Mordor. Mordor is its own little faction and area, boom, right there, nice and simple. You know, and the Southrons and Easterlings you could easily put into one, even if they kind of have two areas. You could easily have them be one faction. And then you could have.
They could also both be included with Mordor.
They could. Not necessarily out of the question, because you do have other theaters across the place, and you know, if it's just Mordor and the Southrons and Easterlings, okay, it kind of limits the battlefield. But I also don't know about giving. Okay, let's give them Moria. Okay, so Moria's stuck in between a bunch of other enemies. That's not going to make any sense for the playing of the game. So it's trying to figure out how to balance that. Same thing with the elves. You know, the elves being their own team, I think, makes sense. But then they have 4 different places across the entire board, which is complicated to say the least. Not impossible, but complicated and strange. That just putting that into a game like X and Allies is totally different. You know, like yes,
United
you have the UK, who, right? As I am saying, you have the UK that has their country there and then has other areas across the board. So are you saying that, okay, we pick Rivendell as their capital, and they have those other spaces as well that they have to defend, and most likely lose, because there's no way to possibly defend those, because they're so far from your capital, and you can't produce units there. Unless, of course, you allow them to build in all of those places, but then that gives them an unusual ability to put a bunch of troops in a bunch of different spaces across the board at any point in time. You know? So finding that balance, again, would be difficult, because it's different. You know, what do you do with the dwarves? The dwarves just going to be up there and away from the major teams we're talking about, so they're never going to play a major role. That's not particularly helpful. Yeah,
like in War of the Rings.
Again, if we put those little, right, exactly. If we put those little strongholds here and there, okay, then yes, there's little places they could make some difference. But again, I'm not sure that necessarily makes sense either. So the board itself, just how the world of Lord of the Rings kind of works in all of Middle Earth, is a little complicated to put in Axe and Allies just from this stuff. And again, figuring out the exact teams for everything is pretty imperative. I think Gundor and Rohan should be 2 separate teams, personally, but they also really don't need to be, because they're basically right next to each other. You know, like, I understand there is some space between them, but they're not far. What are you going to do, put an evil team cutting between them? I don't think that makes sense. So they're allies that are literally right next to each other. They could maybe be one, but I kind of like them separate personally.
Gundor and Rohan are certainly separate. They are without a doubt going to be the 2 biggest allied teams. But there's that whole unity of command issue that they'll have, where they won't be able to attack together, which will definitely make difficulties for it. And there's that same idea is in Axe and Allies World War I. Germany and Austria-Hungary are together. They don't typically work hand in hand. Not as we've ever played. As far as the neutrals go, I don't think I like true neutrals. The pro-ally and pro-axis type neutrals I like more. But again, there's that same thing that I said before of just, they get activated turn 1. So why don't you just give them to them?
Right.
Like if Saruman, if the Dunlendings are not included with Saruman turn 1 moves a guy in and activates the Dunlendings. Every game, without exception, nothing else ever happens. So why even include them like that? A little bit of flavor, sure. But the effect of it is a little bit of added complication that doesn't need to be there. Right. Same thing with like Dale. Dale especially, because that's going to be near allied people regardless. Because if the dwarves are in the game, their capital is Erebor. And Erebor is going to be directly next to Dale. So Dale gets activated every game, turn 1, if it's not already included. With the other northern people, like, there's a bit more argument to it, but if we're not including empty swaths of land between things, ultimately, like, the Bjornlings are going to be adjacent to somebody. So they'll be easy enough to just move into. Unless, like, unless they're cut off in some way by a shadow team. In which case, then maybe. And you'd have to weigh the option of going over to get them.
So, light ships on the river. I'm kidding.
Michael, we're not going back to that.
So,
That there should be some kind of river mechanic,
No rivers.
but rivers might just be a border.
or
That would be the simplest thing.
yeah, unless there's a notable bridge, maybe it is a mechanic where there's
Right.
a river there, so it's going to stop you from moving more than one space. You can ford across. At the very least, you can ford across, but it might stop, like cavalry are not going to move across the river and then continue to move their full speed. They're going to stop on the other side of the river because that's all they can go.
The only scenario where I see that being impactful enough to matter, because the only thing is that's going to slow down cavalry half the time. And that's it. Which really seems like the rivers are hurting Rohan.
Unless we do a mechanic
the-
where if you attack across a river, there's a minus to the attacker or something.
We could, and that's a mechanic that could be put in.
And that's simple.
The other thing as far as like slowing them down is depending on the scale of the map, we could up the movement of people, which could help balance that like there's no planes, so like cavalry would be going like 4 spaces, light infantry would go 2, and if there's heavy infantry they would only move 1. And that would be a lot more maneuvering. But to make that balanced, we'd have to scale the map a lot more.
I think that makes sense.
So it wouldn't
if
be
we're
like
doing an Axis and Allies versus a Risk, because Risk by its nature is pretty compact. How the Lord of the Rings Risk is, but I could see it working real well where we put more spaces in, but the units can also move further. Some of them can.
that also would allow for more teams to actually exist in the game.
Yeah.
And more teams would, because then Rivendell is like a small place, and in the scale of what I would call like a second revised size Axis and Allies, Rivendell's probably 1 space. So is it a team by itself? Probably not, with only a single space. But if we're thinking on the scale of global, Rivendell's probably 4 spaces now, possibly its own space, its own team, and that would open up. All 4 of the elves could be their own separate teams and things like that. That being said, they're all going to be small teams, only building a couple units a turn. But that's kind of how the elves are supposed to be, where it's hard to coordinate. Because otherwise we're going to have to put some kind of limitations on the elves. The elves in particular keep coming up. To the reasons that Alan said, where like, okay, they make 5 IPCs from all these spaces, and they're putting it all in the Elven Halls, because that's where it's important. Kind of skews things a little bit. They work better as separate teams, And the only way that seems natural is if there's multiple spaces, which means scaling the map to fit that. But then how do you maneuver guys around? It's going to take turns and turns to move around. Well, maybe they move a bit faster.
Yeah, I think for to keep things playable as far as the number of factions, unless you have more advanced players who don't mind playing 3 different elf factions as...
I don't mind this, especially since we're having like 8 people over on Sunday. This would be an option for these massive multiplayer games.
They would be. The simple way would be 4 good teams, 4 bad teams, which is still a pretty big game if you've got 8 players, and if there's less than 8 players, people can play 2 teams. But if you've got people who know what they're doing and aren't going to hold the whole game up, sure, you can have one small elf team toward the beginning of a whole round, for example, and then a few other people go, and then the same person plays a second elf faction in the middle of the round real quick. Same person plays it at the end, whatever. You can do that if you know what you're doing. If you don't, then you've got like 15 different teams or more played by 6, 7, 8 players in a whole round, you know? So that could be a little bit heavy.
Okay, let's poke the Allen bear with the stick for this idea.
I'm the bear. Got it. All right. So what am I even considering here?
The scale.
Yeah, scale and factions.
The scale of the map, the number of factions, and increasing movement speeds of units to make up for that. And we will the
map can't be that fucking ginormous. We're looking similar size. I would say a little smaller than War of the Ring. I'd say we're looking more towards the Risk one, because I think the Risk is a little bit less in spaces. I could be wrong though. I feel like they're
it's pretty comparable. War of the Ring I think has a few more.
Yeah, that's my instinct, but I'm not certain on that, to be quite honest. It just depends on where you're looking on the map. So I think it's going to be around that amount of spaces. I would not go any bigger than that generally. We got to figure out how we're going to separate the C zones, maybe. But I think size-wise, that's it. I think faction-wise, the maximum we're looking at is like 8, like 3v5 or 4v4, or something like that. I don't think we want to go more than that, personally. And I think bad guys, again, you're looking Isengard, Mordor, Sauron's Easterlings, which maybe they can combine with Mordor, and then maybe one more bad team after that. So we're looking, I think, 3 or 4 of the Shadow teams, and then the Free Peoples, Gondor, Rohan, Elves, Dwarves. To me, those are the ones that really matter. No offense to the Shire and the other people, but those are the 4 teams that come to mind for me. Now, maybe you could argue to have the Northmen in there in general, so there's something kind of up there in the upper left, but you've got the Elves spread out through it, and the Dwarves arguably spread out through it as well. So I'm not entirely certain, again, how to measure that, but I think we're looking like 3v5 or 4v4, something like that. 8 teams is what I'm thinking.
Alright, so let's try to solidify these 8 teams. Looking at the Shadow, Mordor is a team. Saruman is a team, just including the Dunlendings in Saruman. As far as the other Shadow teams, what we have for consideration, we have Easterlings, we have Southrons, we have Dol Guldur, we have Goblins of the Misty Mountains. How do we want to break them apart? Now, Dol Guldur is probably the place that coordinates the northern effort more than anything. So I could see them definitely being combined with the Goblins of the Misty Mountains, and they'll have a lot of... that kind of gives them a lot of spaces in the middle there, focused around the Anduin River and probably a good portion of Mirkwood. Potentially could throw the Easterlings in there too. Some of the Easterlings come to Gondor, but more of them go north towards Dale and Erebor. So there's a combination of things going there. And then there's the Southrons. Frankly, that's probably how I would break it up if we want to go 4 good guys, 4 bad guys. I would say Dol Guldur is a northern evil faction, and then the Southrons are separate in the south.
And the Shire. They're the most powerful ones.
They're the most powerful shadow faction, yeah.
Yes. Perfect. Just decided.
They've got demon-faced Bilbo there. Even though he does that in Rivendell.